YouTube. Okay, are we not live on YouTube? Can you also check?
Sure.
Okay, we are live on YouTube. Perfect. Okay, I'll mute on the YouTube and LinkedIn. There will be some delay, okay, like the streaming delay, which is fine. So we are live on LinkedIn as well, which is good. Though I will see all the chat questions here also. Okay. Hello everyone whoever is watching now or later. Welcome to my channel Suraj in Cloud. This is our series called Chai in Cloud, where we will discuss, not discuss, it's just a casual chat where we'll walk through our journey. In the first episode, in our career journey, in upcoming episode we'll talk about various other things like what's DevOps, what's platform engineering, what's SRE, or we'll pick some technology and discuss. We we may invite our friends as well. Yeah. So today in first episode, I have we have with us Aditya Konarde, my friend, and yeah. So hopefully we will host more episodes as well in the series. So let's see. So we have Rohit Dalal on chat. Rohit is from our college also. We have our friend Aniruddha Gate from LinkedIn chat, another friend. Cool. So my friend Aditya, please introduce yourself.
Thanks, Suraj. Thanks for inviting me. I'm really excited. And this is called Chai and Cloud, but I am a coffee person, so I'm having my own coffee here that I just brewed. So I'm Aditya. I'm currently working at Red Hat in Berlin as an engineering manager. Me and Suraj go way long back. I think Suraj was the one who pulled me into all of this madness. So thank you, Suraj. Forever grateful for all of that. We are going to hear about that fairly quickly. But yeah, doing all sorts of Kubernetes, SRE, Prometheus stuff. And when we were talking one day, we were like, we should share our experiences. So maybe someone will learn from it. Maybe we will learn from someone else's suggestions. So really looking forward to this.
Cool. So, for those who are new to the stream and new to the channel, I'll also introduce myself. I'm Suraj Narwade. I'm platform engineer at Uswitch here in UK, and I'm my work mostly revolve around the cloud native stuff and the AWS stuff, which we will eventually talk. And again, as Aditya said, we are a we are friends since college, then we were colleagues as well, then we were flatmates as well. Yeah, it's been a long journey. Okay. Hi Gaurav on the chat. Okay, we don't have really agenda as such. It's just couple of things we will discuss very casually. But whoever watching, if you have any questions or anything, do let us know in chat and we'll try to answer. We have few questions in advance, but yeah, it's not a interview style, so we'll just go normal. Yeah. So
It's a very like two guys just sitting and having chai together, like
yeah,
discussing random things, kind of a
about the
yeah,
cloud. So
yeah,
giant
about
cloud.
cloud and taking your questions if anything there's anything we can answer.
Yeah. So, as I mentioned, both me and Aditya, we are from same college. It's Devgiri Institute of Engineering and Management Studies from Aurangabad. So, I'd like to ask Aditya, like, how you got into engineering, and like, was there any influence or you had interest before going into engineering from your school days?
It's very interesting. I like thought about it when we were prepping for this session, and I was like, I don't know how I got into engineering, but I was always interested in computers. So, just for some context, my family, immediate family, doesn't have a background in engineering. My granddad's a doctor. My father was a lawyer. He started a business later on. So not really like I didn't have like a happy path that said, "Hey, go to engineering." But I have been using a computer since as long as I can remember. I had a computer when I was a child, and I always liked playing and fiddling with computers, opening them up, and just installing some software. My granddad was a huge techie, so that's where I started. Like I started early in my childhood playing with computers, playing games, and I was fascinated by like tweaking computers, right? So not I didn't I was not one of those people who started programming when they were 6 year old, but I always liked tweaking computers. After that, I started selling some computer builds and software, and like from there, it seemed like a natural progression to go into computer engineering. I'm always curious to learn other stuff, though. How about you, Suraj? How did you get into all of this?
Yeah, so my father works for a company called Bajaj. It's an automotive company. So since childhood, I was like very curious about the engineering aspect, like, since it's a motorbike company, I used to ask random questions like how this work, how that works, are there robots in your company, how that works. And eventually I got to know about, okay, there's this thing called computer, you should learn. It's a nice interesting thing. Then in one of these summer holidays, I went to some courses in a local institute where I learned very basic Word, Excel, PowerPoint, and I used to enjoy doing all those PowerPoint slides and stuff. And yeah, that was my key starting point. And as I got interest next summer holiday, I learned more about the MS DOS, and that's where my interest kicked in. So yeah, that was more about it. But then
What was
eventually,
the
sorry.
first operating system? And this is a casual chat, so I'm going to keep interrupting. What was the first operating system, and what was the first game you remember playing on your
uh,
computer?
I think the first game I remember was House of the Dead. Like, it was a very
House of the
basic
Dead.
game. Yeah, it was a very basic game. You just use mouse. There will be zombie coming in. You just click and hit them. So okay, there are some questions. We'll take some questions eventually. And then yeah, and I think first operating system, obviously, Windows. There was no option. Didn't heard of Linux at all that time. So Windows 98, I remember, was my first operating system. I used like MS DOS on it. It was pretty cool. Like, some people hate black screen looking at the terminal, but I actually love doing the MS DOS. So yeah, that was the key point. And then eventually what happened was, when the point was there, ki, okay, now I have to get into engineering, but which one? That was the major question. And at the same time, I was into the robotics as well, thanks to transformers. So then I decided, okay, what I'm gonna do is I'll do electronics engineering. Okay, what will happen? Either I'll go to mechanical company or I'll go to some electronics company. If not, there are always option I can go into the programming as well, because yeah, we'll discuss about that as well, like how we did some sort of hardware programming and stuff. But yeah, that was the point where we got into the engineering. But yeah, what we did after that, what we did in engineering, what do you think, Aditya? What you did in engineering?
Yeah, this is a very interesting question. I see engineering as like I think engineering by itself is what I'm interested in, and computers is what I'm passionate about, right? So throughout engineering, I still remember this quote from our director of our college, Ullah Shukar sir. He always used to say, "Study the subject, not the syllabus." Right, so I like very much followed that. I always like studying the subject instead of what's in the syllabus, as you know. And if you're like if you were in university, I don't know how it is now, but if you were in university at that time, your answers in your exams need to be in a specific framework, right? Like you need to have a good handwriting, your answers need to have some bullet points. your code needs to work a certain way, and I was a sort of a rebel in that. That I always wanted to study the subject, so I was very interested in reading all these reference book and knowing how the internals work. So that's essentially what I did in engineering. I was really bad at math. So anyone listening, if you're bad at math and you feel like you can't have a career in computer science, that's totally not true. So you can totally have a computer science career by being like while being bad at math. And I quite like some of the subjects. So computer science always had fun with many of the subjects. Otherwise, also interested in mechanical engineering sometimes, also civil engineering sometimes. So it was all over the place. I'm a curious person, and that's how I went through the 4 years of engineering. So how about you, Suraj? What were some of your favorite things to do, and what was your perspective on engineering?
So I think I got into the electronics engineering, right? And the first bits of engineering were like quite like dealing read the processor and all those instruction set and like led lights and all those things. But eventually I realized like uh, there was the subject called digital image processing, and that's where I got in touch with MATLAB. I did like the software MATLAB, and then it was kind of a programming. So uh, I found it quite interesting. I spent my so many hours in the lab just doing MATLAB. So that's where I realized, like, okay, I do like electronics, but I do like programming as well. So what would be the next step? So I had a chat with one of my teacher, and they said like, in next sem there's this processor called 89C51. Try it out. So uh, I tried that 89C51 processor, but it was very hard, right? Like you have to write the program, then you have to burn it into the processor, then do some wiring and do it. Later on, I realized, okay, what would be the next step? As a hobby, if I want to do something very quick, what should I do? Then I came across this amazing thing called Arduino. Have you heard of Arduino?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. It's quite cool. Like, I wrote like couple of programs for Arduino, and I made a fancy project called LED Cube. Uh, Not sure if you heard of it. It's quite nice. Like,
Is it something to do with Kubernetes, or it's more of a
no, no, no,
cube?
no, no. It's not cube with a K. It's a cube with a C. Normal cube.
Yeah.
So what happens is you have this 3 by 3 by 3 LED cube. You like solder them properly, and then you Arduino you put some code, and it will like flash the LEDs in a particular pattern. It looks quite cool, like very very nice. So yeah, that was my starting point, and then I realized, okay, what I can do more. And then I uh, then what I did was have you heard of uh, MIT, what's that app inventor, where you can make like an Android app using drag and drop
Mm-hmm.
blocks?
Never
So
heard of it.
it's quite nice, where like you can just use the blocks, the scratch blocks, and then you can like build the whole Android app and stuff. So
Wow.
uh,
So it's a
once
no code before it was called no code.
no code, yeah, exactly. So did that. That time I knew about kind of a raspberry. There's this thing called Raspberry Pi, which is pretty cool, but like it was not very accessible that time. Couldn't buy Raspberry Pi. It's quite expensive in India as well that time. So yeah, and that's where the whole college journey was, like mostly deal with some sort of programming, try to find aspects of programming even in the electronic space. So yeah, that's
Before
more about
we
it. Hmm.
before we jump on, right? So I remember our college was notorious for having like a very high percentage of attendance. Did you actually attend college? The audience needs to know this.
Yeah, I did attend my college. Actually, most of the time, like I did spend in a labs, like doing some soldering work, doing some sort of various labs, because that time internet, there was no geo when we were in college, so internet was still little expensive. So the lab was the best resource to have a
high
internet.
speed internet.
High speed
Yeah,
internet.
now that you mention it, I realized that Geo wasn't a thing until I was like in second year, I think, and then
Yeah,
Geo
exactly. Like,
happened.
yeah, yeah, and it changed. It changed our life.
Yeah,
So, yeah. One thing to note, I remember one scene from our college where uh, I was in some form of committee, and there was some election in college. I remember Aditya and his friends, they made a voting project which we actually deployed and like uses for the uh, what's it called, elections in the
like a
electoral
college governing body election.
college governing body election. That was quite cool. Can you tell bit about it, Aditya? What
Yeah,
stack we use?
there was like the lamp stack and like PHP and stuff. Actually, Sanket made most of it, right? So Sanket, who was my senior, who was in the same batch as you, I believe. So what the problem statement was very clear, right? We had an election coming up, and we wanted to get away from like manual chit based voting, which has its flaws, and we wanted to make something that's secure. And funny enough, it is kind of like an open source application. It was internally open source, so people could see that we were not messing with it. And now that I think of it in like modern programming terms, it was like not the most secure because we had access to the like the MySQL server. We had the server as a computer just sitting in a lab in the server room, which was a bunch of just desktop grade computers, right? Like there was no servers, but servers as in like enterprise servers there. So yeah, we sat down. Sanket did most of the work, so thank you, Sanket, for doing that. And I was basically learning and contributing where I can. But this was a good thought experiment on solving a problem. So taking a problem and converting that into code and then deploying it, and that was sort of a elections as a service software in our college. It became quite popular. We did the entire election for whatever, like two. How many people were there? Right, let's say a
Yeah,
thousand people.
yeah, 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 yeah. That was
Thousand
a
users went well, and people got elected. So
yeah,
nice.
yeah.
People had their suspicion though. They were like, "Do you have access to the servers?" And we were like, "Yeah." For the
Yeah,
record, we
but
didn't tweak anything.
yeah, but yeah, that was a good memory from the college time. But yeah, I think that was a bit of a nostalgic moment. But yeah, after that, I think what I would like to ask you is like how you got to know about open source. Now's the real discussion starts. Okay, like
Yeah,
how
people
you
people
got
who
to
have
know.
been waiting for all of this.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Like,
Right.
have you got to know about the open source and specifically Linux, because open source and Linux are like very close to our heart.
Yeah.
Being part of, like, you're still part of Red Hat, me being like in the past part of Red Hat. Open source and Linux are like a integral part. So, uh, yeah, tell me about it.
So uh, my journey with Linux goes way back, right? So I had a computer. I never wanted to keep updating like the computer, and I was into gaming. So at that time, I think I was playing a bunch of high graphic games. So GTA San Andreas was very popular. I think that at that time I was still in school. So what happened was over time the performance of my Windows machine got degraded to a point where it became unusable, right? So I was looking for some alternatives, and I see that a lot of people have that journey. So they got introduced to Linux because their Windows boxes weren't performing enough, and they didn't want to necessarily spend more on getting a higher performance Windows machine. So they just looked at alternatives, and at that point I think I found Linux Mint. That was my first Linux distro, starting with, I believe it was XFCE or Cinnamon, whichever had the lower. I think XFCE is generally better on compute, but I think it was Cinnamon by default. So Linux meant Cinnamon edition. That's where I started with Linux, and I had been using it for a couple of years already before even I got to engineering. So what happened was in the second year of college, as you know, we had this seminar where one of our instructor for Red Hat classes, Mr. Ashutosh Pakre, he gave a session on like Linux and open source and so on. And at the same around the same time, I had gone to this conference for Drupal, which is a content management system similar to WordPress. And the college was kind enough to sponsor my visit to Mumbai, and we went to this conference, and it was at IIT Bombay. They were like, "Hey, this thing is open source, and the other thing is not open source," like or whatever they were saying, right? And we were like, what is open source? Why are you like publishing code for free, and how does it go? So I started learning more about that, and along this journey of Red Hat certifications, Ashutosh sir was kind enough to introduce us to many of the philosophies of open source, and it went from there. Never went back. Still contributing in many ways and using participating in open source. How about you? Like, how did you start using Linux? I'm guessing electronics, or that's the wrong guess.
So I think I got to know about open source before Linux, to be honest, because I remember I mentioned some time back about the I made the LED cube with the help of Arduino. So I used to read about those side projects on the website called instructables.com. So it's the website where people post their side projects along with their source code and stuff. And then when I downloaded the source code, I went on to this website where code is hosted, and I saw, okay, there's this website called GitHub. Okay. I thought only that person has put code there. And then even when I checked other core, other projects they had on the same, then looked, okay, what is this GitHub, and why these people are hosting it here, and why it's not free, like, till that point we never heard of like a free software, like uh, we heard of only thing called pirated software because of torrent and all those things. But we never knew, like, if there's an antivirus, you will go to shop, 300 rupees, you buy the antivirus, right? Office, or like a Windows, you go to shop and buy PC, they'll install. So then I read bit about open source, and then I realized, okay, this Arduino and these Raspberry Pi, they are also like a part of open source community, and that's how it works. And yeah, that was my introduction to open source, but very very brief and small introduction. Later on, we had one subject, Android. uh, with Android, I got to know about, oh, there's this thing called Linux kernel, but didn't know in detail at all. So time goes on, and then when there was like a final semester of engineering, and thinking about like what to do with life, what to do with things. And then one of my friends said, like, there's the seminar in one of the institute, which Aditya mentioned, from our sir Ashutosh Bakre. The institute name is Unnati Computers. He said, there's the seminar. Do you want to attend? It's about the Linux thing. And because of that, I got job into this company called Red Hat. It's quite cool company, very decent culture. Even till that point, I didn't know what Red Hat was, what Linux was. I went to the seminar, and then I learned about, okay, there's this very awesome Linux operating system. It's really cool, and you should definitely try it out. And in that seminar, they gave us a Fedora operating system DVD for
Yeah,
free, and I was like, okay, cool. Like, then I some dots about the open source I learned with the Arduino and Raspberry Pi and this Linux. And then I started reading more about it. Then I took that DVD home, and I still had Windows at home, but I use those virtual box, and I spin up that Linux VM. And yeah, it changed my entire perspective, like how cool the Linux is. And later on, as soon as I finished my engineering, I decided, okay, I want to learn this in more detail, right? Still, even that point, I didn't had internet at home, but by looking at friends, like, I joined the class, and like, I started learning Linux. And there were these two courses, RHCS and RHC, which is Red Hat certified sysadmin and Red Hat certified engineer. I think you also did those two as well, right?
yeah, I did them.
Yeah.
I believe I did them while in college. Yes.
Yeah. So did them. Later on, I did a course on OpenStack as well in the same institute. So by that time, I was like quite aware with open source, the power of open source. What is the Linux, the power of Linux? I started loving Linux. I removed Windows. Even I taught Linux to my younger brother as well at home, so was totally into it. And then at the same time, one thing happened was, because I was dealing with like a Raspberry Pi and all that stuff, I got to know about Python language as well. And then I saw that Python is like pre-installed in this Linux, and you can just do Python command and it opens an interpreter and you can do so many things. So I found it pretty cool. And then I think in the institute itself, I made a home automation project using Banana Pi. It's like a little bit industrial version of Raspberry Pi. So yeah, that was more of the open source thing. Like we will cover more open source bits later in the chat as well. But at that point of time after the college, just before getting the job, that was my open source and thing. Yeah, that was it.
Pretty good. What's your favorite open source distro? Right, like what's your favorite open source Linux distribution so far?
So in that particular time, I did subscribe to this magazine called Open Source for You. uh, Not sure if audience have heard of, but it's pretty crazy. It's like, I think it's a monthly thing, and they give you a lot of information regarding open source community. And with that magazine, they used to give one DVD which has like a new distro. So I tried like a Manjaro operating system, and then Kali operating system, Kali Linux. I loved Kali interface because it had like all these fancy tools pre-installed. Uh, but because in that class, I got to know about Fedora and like Red Hat Linux. I loved Fedora. Like it was pretty minimal, slick, easy to use, many things pre-installed. So yeah, I never really experimented that much with Linux. Just Fedora and then whatever Raspberry Pi had those optimized Linux. But yeah, like I haven't explored much other distro wise. What about
Yeah.
you? What distro you
I
liked?
I am a distro experimenter, as they call it. So I go to distro watch every once in a while. Still do that. I started with Fedora. I think that was my main workstation, but I had a very custom Fedora setup with i3 and like no animations. I hate animations on like interfaces because they're just time consuming. Yeah, I don't know, but I was doing distro watch, and still I have a separate machine where I just install random distros and try out new user interfaces. So I've tried pretty much all of the like more popular distributions. I was saying that Kali makes you feel like a hacker, right, with that dragon and like the dark terminal and dark colors. It's pretty nice.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
still experimenting.
Yeah, yeah, cool, cool. Yeah, so that was pretty good time frame, like just after the college, before the job for me. And then comes the interesting bit for me. Like, okay, I learned this thing, but now what about the job? It's pretty crazy story for me. I'll share mine, then I'll ask Aditya with his story of getting into the job. Okay, so on the job topic, there is one question we have from SK Paul, which says, I have done AZ 900 certification. Still, I have not got any job. Can you please guide what should I do for job? So I would say, I'm guessing AZ stands for the Azure certification, I guess.
I just looked it up. It's an Azure Fundamentals
Uh,
certification.
Azure one. So I think I would say keep keep trying for various things, LinkedIn on any other uh, job portals as well. And also I would say, now you have that knowledge, make your portfolio by writing blogs, make some videos on it, share some content on LinkedIn and Twitter, because nowadays resume is not just a piece of paper. Your social like Twitter or LinkedIn, that also makes a difference. Again, it varies from person to person. Some people like it, some people don't. But again, I would say, if you have knowledge, keep sharing, and eventually people do recognize and offer you a job, or give credentials for that. So
I can add some color to this as a
yes, sure.
I've been a hiring manager now for some time, and some of the things I would say is, first of all, certifications are a great value add, right? But by itself, don't expect a certification to get you a job. So it's not like, hey, I got a certification, I'm gonna go straight to a job. Like, there's a lot of people doing certifications. So what is it that you differentiate yourself with among the crowd, right? So like Suraj talked about, blogging, sharing your knowledge. So I would call it like personal branding. Create your personal brand and read this book by Gary Vaynerchuk. I recommend it to many people. It's called Jab 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 Right Hook, which essentially means give, 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 and then ask. Right. So like, it's very important in this day and age right now to keep getting out there, keep sharing your knowledge, keep creating content, and it's all free, right? As you learn computer engineering, as you learn Linux, as you learn Azure, for example, write about it, talk about it on social media, share it with friends, go to local meetup groups, and eventually you'll find some job that is like great for you, right? And people will ask. So if they see you, for example, going to meetups and speaking about Azure, they'll be like, who's this person? Like, let's see if I have an opportunity in my hand. Is this the right person? So referrals play a strong role in this one, right? For example, if you have internship openings, people will tell you by themselves if you're giving them enough value, right? So please focus on creating value for other people, creating value for the community, creating value for your peers, and like the return will come. And keep
Nice.
applying. Don't forget to apply. Keep a good resume. I'm not saying just go out there and start creating content wildly. Have a good resume. Keep applying. Keep a list of your positions that you want, and just get into those networks as well.
Yeah, yeah. Cool, cool. That's good. Then I think what I was saying, it was about the how I got into the job. That was the thing which I wanted to discuss. I got distracted by a few things here. Okay, so I think what happened was, once I did the course, and then I started applying. So the first job I applied was at Red Hat, and there was this position called DevOps intern, and there was another position called support intern, like Red Hat support intern, based on the knowledge I had, which was the basically Linux and the OpenStack and a bit of a Python language. That was I had, and yeah, it was quite interesting and challenging. Where for the DevOpsy stuff, what they did was, they said, write a Python script which fetches few information from OpenStack, and like that was the first ever, like a program which I wrote. uh, and yeah, it was pretty cool. And then I had some other rounds, and then yeah, I got landed into the Red Hat. And as I mentioned, I did give support interview as well, but I think I decided to go with the DevOpsy one. So yeah, that was my journey, how I landed into the Red Hat with this DevOps intern role. Learned quite a lot with that job, and then moved to Bangalore, which we will eventually share. But yeah, Aditya, want to know like how you landed into your first job.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. It was very random that I landed with Red Hat. So while I was in like my final year of college, I was still doing an internship remotely with this startup called Tempo Education, which was about educating children in Africa through text messages, right? So this was a remote job. My first ever job was a remote one, and I was doing DevOps server stuff for a Django web application. And eventually, I was like, I need a full time role, right? This was an internship role, and I was like, I need something that's more like stable than a startup, and I wanted to get into like a larger company. So I gave a couple of interviews, and the positions I had was a full-time software engineer role, a full-time security engineer role, and a QE intern role with Red Hat. right? So like ultimately towards the end of my college, I ended up with these three options, right? And I was like, yeah, like the other two are software engineer and security engineer roles. I was interested in both of them. But then I was like, yeah, like the fundamentals and the value and like the mission of Red Hat. And at that time, I had been doing Red Hat stuff and I was part of the community for almost like 2+ years, right? And you were at Red Hat already at that point. So I was like, this seems like a better choice. So what happened was I went through this QE intern interview. Fortunately, got an offer to work with Red Hat's OpenStack certification QE team. And yeah, it was actually the same team as Suraj, by the way. Suraj was a DevOps engineer, and we were never part of that same team because by the time I had gotten in there, he had moved on to a different role. But Suraj played a huge part in getting me at Red Hat. So started with QE, and we will hear about the rest of the journey very soon.
Yeah, yeah, that was quite nice. And when we both mentioned that role uh, of like the part of our job journey, we were in Pune office at that time, and yeah, at that point of time, like I learned about this thing called Jenkins, which everyone hates, but it's a pretty good tool. And then what I did was like, because going back to the Linux and open source thing, I started involving into the Python meetup over there, some sort of Linux meetups, and also as a part of work started looking into Docker and Kubernetes and all those things. And you also got part into the Docker meetup as well for some time. And yeah, that's where my journey started. Like already knew open source, but actually involving into the community journey started over there. And then slowly I started managing the Python meetups. And then what else? Yeah. And then after the Python journey, I think I got involved into the PyCon India conference as well. That was like one of the major thing for me, because getting involved into the a nationwide conference as a volunteer, that was pretty cool. Like I was part of a social media team, and I wrote a Twitter bot in Python, which used to like tweet so many things automatically. So yeah, that was a pretty good experience as well. Throughout my intern life, my team supported with all those things which I wanted to do. And one very good thing which my mentor taught in that team was write a blog. Like that was the moment where I started blogging throughout my career journey. Of course, I did some mistakes with blogging. I do admit that I moved my blog from 10 different platforms here and there. But there is this one blog, one of my blog, it's still there. If you go to this link called suraj.pro. Why pro? Because I didn't get IO, because one of our friends, Suraj Deshmukh, got IO first.
That was
So
funny.
I got, yeah, I got Suraj.pro and I started writing. But when I was intern, like I didn't know what to write about. So what my mentor said is like, learned in this month, you write that particular thing in the blog, whether it is tech, non-tech, whatever it is, just write. And one very important thing, another mentor who I would like to name Kushal, told me was like, if there are 1,000 blogs about a particular thing on the internet, right? Your blog will be 1,001st, and which is completely fine. But just write, even if no one reads, it's a reference to yourself. And I think that was the key highlight of my internship. And I started writing blogs, and like more and more after that, I started writing more tech blogs, because then I got involved with the more techie stuff. So yeah, that was my internship life. How about you, Aditya? What was the exciting bit of your intern life?
It was a lot of new things for me. So Pune was the first city that I moved to. Like through my university, I was staying with my parents, as a lot of people in India usually do. So Pune was a lot of different things. Like, it was a new city for me. It was a new experience being part of a corporate life. I got to learn a lot on how enterprise companies work, how there's different teams. I initially thought, like, in engineering, you feel like you do everything, right? Like, you learn everything, you do everything. But then I got introduced to this concept of, hey, you are now part of the QE team, and there is a software engineering team, and there's a user experience team, there's a front end team. And I think I didn't quite process that. I think I was still in this idea of DevOps, where, like, you do everything, right? You find bugs, you solve the bug, you send a pull request, and so on. So, and I'm a very detail oriented person for user experience specifically. I want the user experience to be perfect, right? So I started opening like dozens of bugs on the user experience of the certification tool. I think some of them like are still open, right? But like we rapidly like moved into that, and I was like, okay, let me look at the code base and let me point out where that bug is. Let me try and send a pull request to that bug so that I fix it. And people started asking, hey, what the heck are you doing? Like, you are in the QE team. Like, are you trying to be user experience? Are you trying to be full stack? Like, what's going on? So I learned a lot about that. And in the same at the same time, like, having that background in RHCE, RHCSA, and we had been playing with Docker containers. My final year project was with Docker and Ansible and all of that. I still had this inherent interest in this DevOps mindset, right? So I was still learning, still playing around with Docker, and Kubernetes was coming along at that point. I know you were participating quite a bit in the Python community, so playing around with Python as well. So Python, Docker, Kubernetes, I was like, is this the right place for me? And at some point in that track, I was like offered a conversion to a software engineer role, right? So not a QE role, but a software engineer role. And I was like, okay, so there's this conversion. Again, had the same choice, going to a software engineer role, and then suddenly Pradipto, who is one of our mentors at Red Hat, no longer at Red Hat, but like he said, hey, there's this other role that this other team is hiring. And at that time, you had already moved to that team, and it was called the SRE team. So I leave that cliffhanger there. I had two options: one, a software engineering full time role, and an SRE internship, which would mean I would have to move to Bangalore and do 3 more months of internship, or
Yeah,
6 more months of internship, actually.
yeah, yeah, yeah. That was cool. And I think just before that, again, with Aditya mentioned, with the help of Pradeep, so I also moved to Bangalore with another team where I worked on this project called K Compose, which was like a tool to convert, Docker Compose to the Kubernetes. So yeah, that was pretty cool. Moved to Bangalore, new place, new team, everything. But yeah, again, like, before I go there, like, one of our friend Suraj Deshmukh, who will hopefully join in our next sessions. He was already there. With the help of him, I got, easily set up there. And then Aditya came to Bangalore. I think we lived in same PG initially. uh, and that was a pretty good stuff. And I think you were the one of the first SRE member from the Bangalore. So yeah, that was pretty cool. Like, in Bangalore, when we both moved, we mostly worked around Kubernetes and OpenShift. We learned quite a lot during that time frame. And I think that time SRE was a quite hot topic, and like, it was a new thing, and it's still a hot topic. I'm not saying it's not anymore. But yeah, that brings us to the question from Aniruddha, which was, what is SRE and what are the responsibility? So, Aditya, from your experience, what would you say? What is SRE and what are your responsibilities?
That is a great question. So I'm going to answer it in a couple of ways. I'm going to try to add value on top of what you would find from normal Google search, right? So if you do a Google search, what you will hear is SRE is when you make a software engineer do operations, right? So like taking the idea of operations and automating that through software is SRE. Measuring and making system more reliable is SRE. right? So SRE is site reliability engineering. It is a concept introduced by Google. I see it as an implementation of DevOps, and Google also mentions that in their book. So the core premise of SRE is that you take software and you try to reduce human errors through observation and automation, right? So you take a software and you put systems in place. You think of that entire system as a software, and you automate it in a way that it increases the reliability, and like you do architectural work to decompose the software in a way that you can reduce blast radius and so on, right? So there's a lot of advanced techniques. Will that by itself is another video that we can follow up with. But generally, SREs see it as a software engineer who is trying to solve operational problems. So traditionally, what has been sysadmin stuff through software. So, for example, what we do at Red Hat right now in my team currently, we have a lot of operators. So there's this concept of Kubernetes operators. If you're not familiar with that, it's like instead of having a human being go and click buttons to operate a software, you operate a software through automation, right? So it's software that's operating software. So you're writing the software that's right, or operating other software, right? So that's essentially what SREs do. We try to do like a 70% development, 80 and 30% operations, where there will be incidents. Software will fail, and you will have to fix it in production, but there's always this continuous improvement mindset where you're trying to make it more automated, more reliable, and observe the state and draw some conclusions out of it such that you can automate it even further, right? So that's the ultimate goal of SRE, and that's what I do right now. There's also there are other interpretations of SRE. So it's like a you do you thing, where each company interprets SRE differently. What worked for Google may not work for some, like for all the other companies. It's not like a blanket statement, but I see it as a set of guidelines that are helpful to follow regardless. Each company will implement it their own way depending on their maturity, and their depending on their life cycle and constraints and existing tooling. So yeah, keep that in mind. And if you're confused by seeing all these SRE roles, just go back to the Google book and see what's written there, and try to align it with the mission of the role that you're looking at.
Yeah, that that makes perfect sense. Yeah, if in case like you are wondering more about the SRE, those Google SRE books are quite helpful, and they are free, so you can read them online, download as PDF, and yeah, that's quite helpful. So yeah, that was more about the SRE glimpse. Tell me something about your Bangalore journey, because I know we did most of the journey together because we were in same office. Most of the we were under the same umbrella teams
Yep.
as such, and yeah, we did a lot of fun. So yeah, what do you remember from Bangalore days?
Oh, it was great. So just going back to that cliffhanger, right? I did end up taking the SRE internship role because I was very interested in systems and SRE, and I was like, yeah, this is software plus operations, so I don't want to throw away my background in operations or RCE knowledge just by going into like pure front end back end stuff. I wanted to do the full stack, as they say, right? Didn't happen to be full stack, right? SRE is not like some kind of magical unicorn full stack developer. It's not that, but very interesting. So what we were trying to do was, I moved to Bangalore. Suraj was kind enough. I remember, Suraj, you were very sick when you welcomed me into Bangalore. We were at the same PG, but you helped me move out there, and that's where I met the other Suraj Deshmukh, and got into this world of SRE and Kubernetes, and officially started working on Kubernetes at that time, where we were trying to build a software as a service on top of Kubernetes. So me and Sham, we were the only SREs from India, and we had like three other team members from outside of India. So it was a team. It was a very small team of five people doing software as a service, figuring out how to make this IDE as a service tool chain called OpenShift.io, which Suraj was also working on. Right, so learned a lot. Started going to all these Kubernetes meetups with Suraj. Started helping with organizing that. Also a different vibe. Sort of got into the Silicon Valley of India, as they call it. So a lot of tech people around. I still remember our old office, staying in that PG. Quite the experience. Made a lot of friends. Learned a lot from other people. A lot of tech meetups. I felt the tech vibe where we used to go to dinners with people and like learn about blockchain and cloud and have these conversations. So I feel like it's a bubble where you learn a lot, and it's like being in Silicon Valley because all of your conversations are about that, so it sort of accelerates your learning. So I quite like that. And we have stayed we did stay in the same PG. So for the international audience, it's more like a it's like a dorm, but it's not really a dorm. It's like a shared apartment thing where, like, if you're a student or if you're just starting out, young professionals quite often stay in a setup like that before you ultimately move on to your like own places. But it's very common in India to do a PG for either students or young professionals.
Yeah, yeah. And yeah, also I think just to add to that, we moved into the same flat as well, like couple of our other colleagues slash friends as well. So yeah, that was a one good ride, because I remember when we got into the managing the Kubernetes Bangalore meetup, we learned quite a lot through the meetup, and like made a lot of friends from other companies as well. Got to learn many more things, more than more than just tech. So yeah, quite thankful for the Bangalore city as well, the whole meetup scene over there as well. So learned quite a lot. Yeah. And I think Yadne asked a question, how was the meetup thing in Bangalore versus Pune back then? I would say, like, I can answer that, like, it depends. Like, that point of time, if you choose technology wise, let's say there was a Python, huge Python meetup scene in Pune, but I would say very less in, Bangalore. Even if it was there, we didn't go there. But Kubernetes wise, Bangalore was pretty heavy. In Pune, there was a meetup. I know our friend Vishal was part of this Pune Kubernetes meetup, pretty decent. But Bangalore had much more other meetups as well, which were pretty cool. I won't say like a Bangalore meetup scene is very better than Pune or something. They are equal, really good people at both the places. So yeah, really good, really good. And also I think throughout the journey, we participated in DevConf as well, DevConf India, and we went for other conferences as well. So yeah, and I think as part of work, we used to have like a internal sessions as well, where we 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 had like a deep dive into Kubernetes, Docker, OpenShift, writing the operators and controllers for them. So yeah, it was a quite good journey. Yeah.
Yeah, and that culture, right? Like Red Hat has this culture where you're expected to
Yeah.
share, you're expected to be open, right? That's part of the company culture. So that allows you to succeed in a way that you go to meetups, you go to conferences, you're always like social and you're sharing your knowledge out. So I think like being enabled to do that was an important catalyst in our careers, because we were going out there and like Red Hat was supporting us, and like we were going to these meetups, and a lot of our colleagues were actually very enthusiastic. And there's this spirit of open source where you're taking what you know and you're sharing it out there with the community. So that has been very helpful, especially in conferences like DevConf, PyCon, and international conferences. We went to a couple of KubeCons at that time as well. So it has been very helpful to just like get to know a lot of people, not just from your own mindset, not just from your own company, but from other companies as well. We have a lot of connections with like that we made in Bangalore with people from completely different use cases, completely different companies trying to adopt Kubernetes, and it was just enlightening to hear about their use cases, learn from them, and so on.
Yeah, yeah. And I think with the help of these communities and like opportunity we had to, present at conferences, like not just Bangalore or Pune, but like we got some friends like across the world, right? Like, like you, I think you've been to DevConf in Europe as well, and I've been to FOSS Asia, Singapore. So yeah, made some new community, open source friends and stuff. So yeah, it's been a ride. It's been a ride. Yeah, cool. Yeah. So I think that was like a highlight of our Bangalore stay, the meetups and friends and all those stuff. Now I think one of the last topic for the stream I'd like to share, like, we we timed this for like an hour or so, but like, yeah, okay, it's a casual, we can always go about. Now next question is like, now currently you are in Berlin, but like how's been your journey like from Bangalore to Berlin, and what was the key takeaways, and also from tech perspective. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So it has been wild. So one day I was complaining to my manager that, hey, you know what? The office people are doing sort of a relocation within the office where they're moving someone's desk, and I would like to move from. I would like to keep my desk. I quite liked my desk in the Bangalore office, and they were trying to change it because we were just shuffling teams around. Right? And he's like, "Oh, you know what? I forgot to tell you, but we think that you should move to Berlin, right?" So I was like, "What? That's a huge surprise." So just winding that back a bit, I think it's very important to have a manager that knows your goals and helps you succeed, right? So I'm forever grateful to Jake. If you're watching this, Jake, thank you. And what he did was he anticipated, right? We had this conversation about I would like to move out of India, I would like to move somewhere like maybe in the US, maybe to Europe, I don't know yet. And he identified that opportunity. So at that time, we had just acquired CoreOS. So Red Hat had just acquired CoreOS. CoreOS happened to have an office in Berlin, and I was working on Prometheus, which had a lot of maintainers and still does in Berlin. So he was like, "Yeah, it would be a great learning opportunity for you to move to Berlin." Right. So at that point, let's say I was working on Kubernetes and Prometheus, and CoreOS was this new startup where like they were like pioneers in operators and Kubernetes stuff. So he identified that opportunity and he presented it to me, right? So I had no, like, just full transparency, I had no plans to move to Berlin. It came as an opportunity, and I was like, yeah, let's take that risk because like it changes your perspective, right? So from a tech perspective, what happened was I moved to Berlin. I learned a great deal of knowledge. I got a great deal of knowledge from the folks at CoreOS. So thanking everyone there, and like moving there again, similar to the move from Aurangabad to Pune, it was a completely new city for me. But at this point, I had moved a couple of times, right? So from Aurangabad to Pune, Pune to Bangalore, and then Bangalore to Berlin. I was a minimalist, so I was lucky enough to just carry one medium-sized trolley bag and move to Berlin in this exciting city. It's full of startups. I would say Bangalore is still a bit more technical, but what Berlin has allowed me to do is mix tech with other perspectives, right? Like you meet a lot of artists and DJs and dreamers here, and people doing alternate stuff as well. So your perspective opens up quite a bit. And from a tech perspective, I did get this time zone alignment, right? So now I was better enabled to like meet with people. I had more bandwidth to meet with people in my regular working hours within Europe, also in the US. So that collaboration increased. Beyond that, like tech wise, I think Bangalore is still like more techy, right? So like you go to a random bar, you'll probably find more techies in Bangalore than in Berlin. But career wise and like holistical development wise, Berlin has been great for me so far.
Nice. Yeah. So
And how did you like was it at the same point where like when I moved to Berlin? I think I moved to Berlin earlier than you moved to London. So how was your journey there?
again, my journey is quite similar to you. Like we both first moved to another city from Aurangabad to Pune. We moved, then we changed our state from Pune to Bangalore, right? And then it was a almost a country change, right? Yeah. So uh, one second, sorry. Yeah. So I think it was like a bit challenging as well for me because earlier I was into the software engineering role, where yes, I was dealing with Kubernetes and stuff, but it was like a writing a CLI tool, and the scope was very less. And the next bit I want was exploring the real world scenarios, like a production scenarios, dealing with those kind of things. So I decided to take the challenge of platform engineering here in London. uh, Quite a new journey, new place, new things. You are getting to know new culture, new things. And also at the work, like you are dealing with 10 different things. For example, in previous job, there was just one thing. You will write Golang, and you will write that Golang for Kubernetes and OpenShift. That's it. But now when I moved here, it's like, you are managing four different Kubernetes cluster. You are upgrading them. You are patching them. You are also looking after the underlying Linux operating system. You are also looking after their monitoring stack. You are also looking after their logging stack. You are also developing new tools which will help developers. You are also supporting them. So yeah, it was a very wide role, and quite a learning. And I would say I'm still learning all those things. And
Same.
whatever I learn, I do try to share via blogs or like videos and stuff. So yeah, great journey, still learning so many things. But yeah, it's again, I do agree with you. Bangalore had a different tech scenes. And one thing I would like to mention is, in India we have meetups mostly on weekends, like like on Saturday, and we had that habit. But when I moved here, and I think Aditya will also agree with that, is here the meetup happens on a weekday after work.
Yeah.
So that was a change for us. And like initially I struggled to participate in some of the meetups. But yeah, it's been a great journey. So yeah, one of the there's one question on the chat, quite interesting.
Yeah.
Let's post here. The Rex asked which language knowledge is required to contribute to Kubernetes, and I think Yadnya also replied to the question as an answer. But yeah, I think whatever language like there are client libraries available. You can contribute to those client libraries, or you can leverage those client library and contribute to those projects which are using them, or you can contribute to them. One of the example I can give is one of my ex-colleague, Rohan. He works on I think, Kubernetes client, Java Kubernetes
Java
client.
client. Yeah.
Yeah, Java client. So whichever language you can still contribute to the community, and which is great. So
Yeah, I would even take a step back and say you don't need to know programming to contribute to Kubernetes. So you could actually start by contributing to other things, like there's Slack roles, there's release roles, there's like artwork, there's talks, there's organizing events, there's meetups, there's all sorts of contributions, and all contributions are contributions, right? So don't feel the need to only think, or don't only think that only language contributions or programming contributions, or like if I made a pull request to the API server which got merged, that's the only contribution I can make. Don't hold that bar too high, right? Like any contributions are welcome. The community is very welcoming. So I would just say, if you are interested in language specific contributions, fantastic. If you feel like that's your strength, go ahead and contribute there. But if you're just like, I know a lot of people in the community, and like generally students as well, right? They are trying to contribute in some way, but the API server or Kubernetes itself, at this point, there's been many years of development and many people hours worth of development in this project. So the bar to code contributions is fairly high, right? Because people are using this in stable enterprise software and so on. So like that may feel daunting at first if you are not an experienced developer. If you are and you can go there contribute, fantastic. But if you're not that, just go ahead and join the Kubernetes Slack and see what other things you can contribute to, right? And as you contribute to release tooling, contribute to blog posts, contribute to like component deep dives, You will learn about a specific component and you can try and map that to what your skill sets are. Kubernetes is a very vast ecosystem at that point, at this point. So I would say like start very specific, right? So don't try to like solve the general problem. Go in and see, hey, I'm very interested in networking. I have this one project that I know. I will just go deep dive into that project, spend some time, and then try and make a small contribution to that one, as
Yep.
opposed to trying very broad. So just
Yeah,
a
yeah.
quick suggestion.
I would like to add something to that as well. Like there are many other projects as well, other than Kubernetes, where you can contribute. There's like a whole CNCF has like a whole other projects as well. You can contribute to them, and each project has like like a SIG, which is special interest group. And like for example, if you are interested in docs, you join sig docs. If you are interested in networking, you join sig networking. And people are very warm and welcoming. They'll help you to learn things. They'll help you to find the right issue, like a good first issue to work on. So yeah, it's quite good. Like you don't need to like straight away no code to the contribute. You can like start with docs and slowly go into the uh, code. So I think there's one more question. It's a bit of a non-technical question, but again, a still good question. What would you say to this, Aditya?
It's an interesting question. I think English is not our like first language, and I think it's like also about removing that mental barrier, saying, "Hey, it's like no one's English is perfect, really, right? There's always differences in the way we speak and the way we communicate. But then there's objectively some things that you can do, right? Like for example, if you have really bad grammar, you probably want to like take a grammar class and just try to make sure that your grammar is more or less correct. It doesn't have to be 100%. I'm guessing it's like none of ours is 100%. I'm making probably a bunch of mistakes here in the sentence, but be confident, right? Like as long as you can communicate, it's all about communication. People are going to have different English skills. Like even within Europe, I can see that people have different ways of speaking. They form their sentences differently and so on. But as long as you can put your point across in a concise way, be brief, be concise, and practice, practice, practice. That's what I'm going to say. A lot of us fall back to speaking our native languages because we feel like we are not there yet, right? So but it's a chicken and egg situation. If you never speak, you're never going to learn, and if you're never going to learn, you're never going to feel confident in speaking. And it's easy to say, right? Like go out there and like start speaking English everywhere that you are, but like I know that it takes some time. So what I would say is what really helped me is starting in a small circle, just writing and reading and speaking and recording videos, speaking to yourself, speaking to your friends. I see my sister is very young right now. She's in school and she and her friends are always speaking English to each other, right? So this next generation is now already speaking English to each other in school, and she's in an English school. But if you don't have that background, if you don't feel very comfortable, start small, start with a friend and decide, hey, every weekend we are just going to talk about a random topic that we enjoy, just like we are, me and Suraj are right now. Just sit down and we are going to speak in English, right? And then it also helps to be in an environment that's conducive to learning and speaking English. For example, I've learned a lot by just working. I've always had US colleagues, right? So like you're forced to speak English 8 hours a day for multiple years. You eventually it will improve for you, right? So like try to put yourself in a situation where you are forced to learn English. And that's what they say about German as well, right? I live in Germany, but I don't speak German very well. It's because I'm not forced to learn German, right? I'm working for a US based company. I always speak English, so my English is probably better than my German. So try to put yourself in a comfortable situation with a friend and learn with them. Try to objectively improve your grammar and like skills. There's a lot of great courses, free courses on English speaking and confidence building on that. And then try to put yourself in a situation or a position that you are required to speak English in, right? So that experience and that time commitment is going to be more beneficial than anything else.
Yeah,
That's what I
yeah.
would say. And Suraj, you live in the home place of English, so like birthplace of English. So what do you think?
Yeah, I think I also have kind of a similar opinion on this question, because uh I think the similar case, we always had like a colleagues whose first language is English are from US, are from UK, and then we already, like, talking them in English. But definitely in the beginning years of a career, I was also afraid, like talking in English, if my English is correct, if it is not, what should I do? And even last week, like one of my friend who recently got into a team, which for she has like a global colleagues, and she also said the same thing. Like, I'm afraid of, if my English is correct. So one thing I told myself, and I tell everyone who asks this question is, don't be afraid. What max will happen? Like, like the sentence you'll say is wrong, and the next person will say, sorry, can you repeat? And then you repeat, right? Or if you don't understand next person's accent, which is perfectly fine, you can just say, can you repeat? Sorry, I couldn't hear properly, can you repeat? Which is perfectly fine, and people do understand and they will help you out. The only thing you have to do is, don't be afraid, just go ahead, speak out. And what I personally did was start more reading. So I do read blogs which are in English. Of
Yeah.
course, like, we do watch movies in our native languages, but I do try to watch things in English as well with the subtitle, which helps, right? Like, you hear and you read as well. It helps you with a better communication skill as well. So yeah, that's more about it.
To your point, Suraj, I just would add immersion is the word here, right? So immerse yourself in that language and you will succeed. So reading, writing, listening, watching English movies, listening to English music, like one of the ways I learned English, and I think it wasn't my native language, but I did study in English school. But also, like having access to the internet at an early age helped me quite a bit in my formative years learning English, because I was always listening to English music. I quite liked English music. I quite liked Latin music. I was watching English movies, TV series growing up. So it's sort of, and you can probably tell a bit by my accent, people are always confused. It's like a mixed accent somewhere, but that's what I grew up with, just watching and listening to English movies, and watching
Yeah,
English movies, listening English songs. So don't worry about that at all. Like people, like the way you speak English is your unique way. Everybody has their unique way of forming sentences, speaking. So it's you do you. Don't worry about anything. Just be confident and try to communicate. It's a tool for communication. In the end, remember, if nothing works, sign language is a thing, right? So anything that you can say and put out there is already a plus.
yeah, yeah. And also, like, nowadays there are ample amount of resources available on the internet as well. Like, Yadna mentioned in the comment, which was podcast, right? Like, podcast is also a great way to hear English, try your English out, and there are various podcasts available as well, which is pretty cool. So yeah, I think that brings us to the end of the stream. It's almost more than an hour now, more than we planned, but it's okay. That's pretty cool. Just to summarize, like, what we did, whoever joined in between the stream or later the stream, or whoever will watch later in the stream, I would say thank you for joining, and we just shared our life and career journey. Okay, so, and I think we'll try to keep this series on. We'll invite more of our friends who were part of this journey, and we'll also discuss on other topics in our next streams, like such as what's DevOps, what's SRE in more depth, and what's platform engineering or other things. And if you have any topics which we should cover, do let us know in the comment, whether on LinkedIn or YouTube, or do reach out to us on LinkedIn or Twitter as well. Our DMs are open, and feel free to reach out to us as well. Do you have any closing thought, Aditya?
That's it, Suraj. Thank you so much for hosting it. And I
Yeah,
was again going to say, folks, we are here so that we can give back to the community. So, any ideas, any questions, any topics that we can help you with, please, please, please reach out. We are looking for that feedback, right? Because we want to make content that's useful and helpful for people in the community. So, if you have specific areas that you're trying to grow into, specific questions about the areas of work that we have or on our career journeys, now you have the background, and we will try to dive deeper, as Suraj said, over the next couple of episodes. But yeah, looking forward to hearing from you all, and thank you all for listening, whoever stayed around for 1 hour and 13 minutes. I hope this was a worthwhile Sunday podcast for you.
Okay, cool. Thank you so much. Have a nice week, and we'll see you next week.
See you next time.
Yeah, bye.